Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Okay, no, that sounds good. Do you mind if I crack a couple windows?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Why is Joe? Because he's a great board. And it's your.
Wait, can you take it actually?
Oops, that's.
Beginner chess lesson.
Oh, he's like outside.
Pretty much.
Push off.
Yeah. He's got a small board.
Oh, okay, yeah, for the projector.
Pretty nice, yeah.
Alright, we might as well get started then. It is 7:18. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to Beginner Chess. Alright, I'm Naranjan. You guys all probably remember me. We got Adam over here. He's our events manager, brand new for this year as well. And we got Charlie, president, of course. You've all seen them around anyway. So today we're like carrying on with what we talked about last week. So we're looking at the opening principles again. But instead of like just talking about the general principles, we're actually going to go in depth and look at like one of the specific openings. So we're going to talk about the London system today. And I've got no learning objectives. I usually have learning objectives, but it's just one, pretty much. It's just how to play the London. So I figured I didn't want to have learning objectives. It's just one, it's not really important. But just a reminder of what we did last week, we looked at what the opening was. So essentially, the opening is the first few moves in a chess game. So first like probably 8 to 10 moves roughly. So it can look like this. This is what we're actually learning today. So this is the London system, and this is also another example of an opening as well. So it can be anywhere between like 8 to 10 moves, like the first 8 to 10 moves. And essentially what the goal of the opening is to get as many of your pieces into the game as possible and try and control the center as well. So openings come in all different shapes and sizes as well. So as you can see, like all these different types of openings, they're all very different in their approach of a chess game, and like they're all very different pretty much. And today we're going to focus on just one of them. We're going to focus on the London system. I did have another one in mind. I was going to look at the Caro-Kann today, but then I realized I had 60 slides. I didn't really want to bore you with 60 slides, so I figured we'll just trim it down to just one. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll learn something today. And yeah, so just a reminder as well. So in the opening, we try and control the center. So we do it with our pawns and not our pieces. I mean, there's like other different openings where you try and control it from with your pieces as well. Hello. But today we're focusing on the London system, which is controlling it with our pawns. And so you guys remember that I like to split it into different parts. So part one is talking about what the London system actually is. What is the London system, right? Basically, it's like one of the most common chess openings of all time, pretty much, after the move d4. So pawn d4. Pretty much what we do is we play pawn d4. The usual response is pawn d5, so over here. And to enter the London system, we play the move bishop f4. And what this does is pretty much, so I talked about that we need to control the center, right? And the whole point of bishop f4 is to control this e5 square, right? So whoever has control over the opening, like whoever has control of the center, hello, whoever has control of the center in the opening pretty much is better, right? And the London system takes advantage of that and tries to get as much control of the center as possible. and essentially the move bishop f4 tries to take control over this empty e5 square. And so if you ask anybody, like any chess player, about what their thoughts on are about the London system, they either hate it or absolutely love it. So Josh right here is a very big hater of the London system. He does not like it at all. And if you ask like other people as well, they might love it. There's no in between, pretty much. And the reason why people feel so strongly about it is because it's very easy, I'd say. It's very straightforward to understand, because it's like you play all the exact same moves over and over again, and regardless of whatever black does, so your opponent does, you still pretty much get the same kind of structure, right? And so that structure itself looks something like this, right? So the main characteristics of it is that you have what's known as a pyramid of pawns, right? It looks like a house, it looks like a pyramid, whatever you want to call it. It looks like this pretty much. And so we have a knight on d2, we have a knight on f3, we have a bishop out, and we have this bishop on d3 as well. And essentially we create this structure, and pretty much we go from there. I have like a sort of reflective question on most of these slides, just to try and get you like thinking about the opening and like different variations and like what might be going on. So I've told you that we have this pyramid structure, right? And what do you guys think? Why do you think we have this? What do you think is so good about it? I want to open it up to you guys. What do you guys think? It's a difficult question, I know, but take your time, and hopefully you'll get there. Any ideas? Anything come to mind? No? It was a difficult question, I promise you that. It's okay that you don't know the answer, because that's what you're all here for, you're here to learn something. So, essentially what the pyramid of pawns does is that it's a very solid structure, right? So, what this means is that anything that black tries to do is very difficult to break apart, right? So, let's say if they play like a move example, like they play c5, right? Trying to get rid of this pyramid, they're trying to break it down, right? But it's quite difficult for black to like disintegrate this pyramid of pawns, basically. And that's what's so good about the London, right? It's quite indestructible in a way. And another reason is that, remember we talked about controlling the center as well. So a really good characteristic of the London is that all of these pieces inside the pyramids, they control the center like incredibly well. And I'll get on to like how it does that like later on during the session, but just like as a note, like as like a nugget of information, that this pyramid of pawns is very solid, right? It's very difficult to break through. So yeah, essentially you're trying to get this structure in every game pretty much. And essentially the heart of our London system, like the beating heart of it, what gives it life, is our light square bishop. So our bishop on d3. This is, I'd say, probably the most important piece in our position, because we talked about this pyramid, right? And the light square bishop stands in the middle of this pyramid, right? And it's pretty much the center to all of our attack, pretty much. So what this bishop does, I like to think of bishops as like a sniper rifle, pretty much, right? They sort of stay there, and they have like really long range, and they stay there until the moment is right for their time to shoot, pretty much. And essentially, we'll get onto like later on like what the main ideas of the London system. But what you need to remember is that in the London system, essentially you're trying to attack the king like with as many pieces as possible. And so the bishop on d3 is a really good like starting point, pretty much, because the bishop attacks, like it has really good sights on the enemy king. So if you can see my cursor, you can see that this bishop is basically staring at the enemy king, right? And later on in the game, you're gonna try and like maneuver all your pieces towards the enemy king, and that bishop is like the one that started it all pretty much. It gives our attack the momentum pretty much, right? And so essentially, like I said before, that everything inside the pyramid is sort of very safe. Anything that black tries to do, it sort of like gets repelled away. It's like a thorn pretty much. Hello. It's sort of like a thorn, right? So if you try and attack it with black, then it's quite difficult to it's quite difficult for black to attack it pretty much. And so the bishop inside there is very safe, right? And so I've got another one of these reflective questions as well. It's another difficult one, I promise you that. But try at it, try and figure out. But we've said that this bishop is very strong inside of its pyramid. But how might black try and counter this pretty much? How might they try and counter the strong light square bishop? It's difficult. Like, this is borderline intermediate stuff as well, but I like to get like your thinking about it as well. So hopefully you might have some ideas, you might have no ideas. It's completely okay. What do you think? It's okay. This one? So like in this position right now, pretty much, how would we? Yeah. You can come up, you can point to it as well if you want. Yeah. So you're saying here to e4? So bring it here? Yeah. That's one of the good examples actually. So that is correct pretty much. Like, essentially the whole point of this bishop is to get this, like, to stare at the king. But if you block it with the knight, then it stops seeing it. It stops seeing the king. So that's pretty much, that's what I was looking for actually, so well done. So, just to recap, essentially, the light square bishop is like the most important, I'd say one of the most important pieces in this attack. And its goal is to try and aid all of your other pieces towards the king side. And another like really important thing that you need to know about the London system is that your control over the e4 and e5 squares determines how good your position is. So remember I talked about last week that I talked about controlling the center, right? So we put our pawns first into the center, and then we bring our pieces behind the pawns to control the center. And trying to figure out how well controlled like the e4 and e5 squares are, that determines how good your position is. So I've got two really good examples of positions. Well, one example pretty much. Yeah, it is one example, yeah. One example of like a really good London setup, right? So you notice that it's slightly different because this bishop is not here, but it's like sort of dropped back. But essentially they're both very good examples of London system because of the control that we have over these two squares. And you notice that this example on the left, we have three different pieces and pawns controlling the e5 square. So we have the pawn controlling it this way, we have the bishop controlling it this way, and we have the knight controlling it this way as well. So that's three pieces and pawns that are controlling the e5 square. Compare that to black. How many pieces of pawns do you think they have controlling that center e5 square? What do you guys think? One? So someone's saying one, someone's saying none. So the one on the left, yeah. So how many pieces or pawns are controlling the e5 square for black? Just the knight, okay. So one, yeah. It's correct. So it is just the knight. So three pawns and pieces are controlling for white, and one knight is just controlling it for black. So you can see like how powerful the London system is pretty much. And compare that to the one on the right as well. So the bishop is controlling e4, and the knight is also controlling e4 as well. So depending on like how many pieces and pawns control those two squares, basically determines how well your position is, right? And essentially, I talked to you before, like roughly about what the long-term plans of the London system is, and essentially what it is that at the end of the day, once you have sufficient control over those e4 and e5 squares, what you want to do is you want to plant your knight into the center, so into the e5 square. And what this does is that, so remember that the knight was previously on f3. We're trying to move it into the center and plant it there. We're going to leave it there, right? And remember that every piece has its own eyes as well. So once something else moves, another piece or a pawn has an opportunity to see more of the board, right? And this is a really good example of that, because once the knight moves, this queen can see a lot more of the board, right? So it was here before. This queen could only see probably this square, right? But now it can see all of this diagonal, right? And so remember that we talked about like we have to try and attack the enemy king, right? And so moving the queen here to f3 and then rotating it towards h3 allows us to essentially go for this big attack on the enemy king, right? This queen can stare at the enemy king, supported by the light squared bishop as well. So we talked about it as being like the heart of the pyramid, right? So this queen compared with this bishop as well. And then hopefully later on we'll get the knight in as well. And essentially we're bringing all of our pieces towards the king side. We're attacking the king pretty much, right? I put a lot of text on there. I'm sorry about that, but hopefully that makes some sense, right? So we're trying to maneuver all of our pieces into the enemy king's territory pretty much. And just a side note as well, the reason that we're playing this move over here, so knight e5, we don't want to take this knight, right? So this knight, we don't want to take this knight, because remember what I said before about controlling the center, right? If we take this knight, we're essentially saying, okay, I don't care about the center, you have it, pretty much. That's not what we want to do. We want to maintain our grasp of the center, pretty much. And if we take the enemy knight, we're basically surrendering the center. So essentially we want black to take us, pretty much. We don't want to take them, because if black does take us, right, we take back with our pawn. So this pawn goes over here, pretty much, and attacks this knight. I remember, I'm trying to bring all these concepts together as well. So this knight right now is one of the only defenders of this pawn. And remember, we're trying to go for this attack, right? We're trying to go for this attack with the bishop and the queen. So basically, if black takes this, we recapture with our pawn. This forces this knight out of the way. This was the only the one defender of this pawn. And so our position becomes alive pretty much. We basically secured a huge advantage if black takes our knight. And remember that we don't want to take this as well. We don't want to take this knight, because that's essentially surrendering our control of the center. So just some nuggets of information as well there. Does that make sense so far? Are you guys understanding it well? Yeah? I'm going too fast? Am I going too slow? Good? Yeah? Okay. Another good thing to know when you're learning openings, any openings, whatever it is to figure out what the most forcing moves your opponent can do. Like how your opponent can counter you. And one of the main ways that black can counter us immediately is to play this move c5. So essentially what pawn c5 does is that, remember that we're trying to control the center. So by playing c5, it's essentially saying, if we take this pawn, we essentially surrender our grasp of the center, right? The whole point of the London was to control this e5 square. So if we take this, we're stopping control of the center, right? And so another thing about pawn c5 is that, remember I told you that every move that someone makes, different pieces become active as well. So moving this pawn makes this queen active as well. so it can see more of the board. And like I said here, the idea of pawn c5 is to open up the black's queen's diagonal. So this is one of like the ideas that black can have. They can try and create counterplay pretty much. This is a bit more intermediate as well, but it's nice that like you guys can understand this as well, because you're trying to beat your opponents, you know? You're trying to know more than your opponents. So knowing this, hopefully you'll figure out like how to win the game pretty much, I guess. And so just to recap, like pawn c5, this is trying to destabilize our center pretty much, our grasp of the center. And so I've got a question for you guys. How do we counter this? How do we counter this move pawn c5? What do you guys think? Remember that the idea of pawn c5 was to destabilize our center. So maybe there's a move that can re-stabilize it, it can strengthen our center in another way. What do you guys think? Any ideas so far? It is difficult, I promise you that. It's okay if you don't know. So remember that pawn c5 is attacking this pawn, right? It's trying to destabilize the center. So is there a move that can support this pawn again? Like, is there a way that we can reinforce this pawn? Yeah? Pawn c3. Yeah, exactly. So pawn c3, pretty much, remember that we're trying to create this pyramid structure as well. So pawn c3, not only does it create our pawn structure of the pyramids, it also strengthens our grasp of the center as well. So even if black does take, so if they take this pawn with this, we can always recapture with the c pawn as well, right? And so we've still gained like control of the center anyway, regardless of what black does with pawn c5. And so c5, c3, pretty much. We can play move pawn c3 to counter the threats of pawn c5. And there's like a really fun thing that like, it's not fun, but like it's like a chant that people do. I don't know why people do this, but every time every time you hear the words c5, like the next thing in your mind should be c3. So c5, c3, c5, c3, c5, c3. That's why I put it over here as well. I don't know why this became famous, but like it's a nice thing to remember pretty much. c5, c3. Every time your opponent plays c5, instinctively just play c3, you know? I don't know why that became a thing. Like it's like I don't know why that became popular, but it's good because it's like intuition at the end of the day. Like it becomes intuition. So c5, c3. Every time black plays pawn c5, just play c3, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? I've got 3 tips and tricks for you as well in the London system. And essentially, like, they're sort of like very tricky things to understand, but hopefully, like, now that I explain it to you, then hopefully you might see this in your games and you'll think, oh, I learned this in my beginner lesson, and then you'll be able to do that again. So we have this position on the right, and if you notice that the 2 dark squared bishops, they're staring at each other, and a lot of beginner games, you guys tend to struggle with realizing when do I trade my pieces or when do I retreat the pieces, right? And this is a really good example. Do we trade the dark square bishops, or do we do something else? Do we retreat it? And I want to, like, another reflexive question. Should we trade the bishops, or do we retreat the bishops? What do you guys think? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're saying that we should trade the bishops? Okay. Okay, you'd retreat it. Where would you retreat it to? G5? Okay. So that's an idea. That's okay. But remember that we're trying to control the center pretty much. So remember that we're trying to control this e4 and this e5 square. So retreating the bishop this way, it's essentially saying that this bishop can have the center pretty much. So we want to still maintain our grasp of the center, but retreating is still a good idea. But is there another way we can retreat the bishop but also still control the center, the e5 square? What do you guys think? Did that make sense, by the way? Okay. Any ideas? Yeah. This square? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. So that is the best move. So anytime that these bishops stare at each other, we should try to rock back the bishop, right? So we should bring it back to g3. And essentially, what you said, Xen, is exactly correct. So retreating it still maintains our grasp of the e5 square, so that center square. But whereas if we trade it, then black's queen comes in, and we've essentially stopped controlling the center pretty much. We still have this pawn and knight controlling it, but it's not enough. We need more, right? And so keeping the bishop on the board on g3 is very nice. And another really nice thing about this as well is that if we do rock it back to g3, if black does take, if they take our bishop again on the next move, we can always recapture with the h-pawn, right? And there's another thing that I like to mention, another little bit of nuggets of information, is that the pawns on the side of the board, so the a and the h-pawn, they're sort of half as powerful compared to all the rest of the pawns because of their control. They only control one square, whereas this pawn, in the center, they control two squares pretty much. So if we rock this bishop back and black takes our bishop and we capture back, then this pawn kind of becomes twice as more powerful as it used to be pretty much. And also remember that we talked about this pawn over here as well. So we're trying to attack that pawn with our bishop. We're trying to get our queen in as well. But when we take back this way as well, so if we take back the bishop here, notice that our rook becomes so much more powerful as well, right? So if this pawn wasn't here, this rook has eyes on this side of the board as well. So essentially, bringing the bishop back this way is a lot better because we have more grasp of the center. Does that make sense? Yeah? Everything is about controlling the center in the opening pretty much. So, as I said, we've got to retreat it. And I've got another thing for you as well. So, we talked about the move c5 as well. And the whole point of c5 was not only to destabilize the center, but also to bring this queen in, right? So, trying to create counterplay. And the reason why there is counterplay here is because this queen now attacks this pawn as well. And this pawn is undefended, right? Oh, I just showed you the answer. Whoops. Sorry about that. But pretty much this pawn is undefended. So how do we deal with that? You guys probably saw it, but if you didn't, then let me know. Is there a way we can stop this queen from attacking this pawn? Any ideas? Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the moves as well. So pretty much pawn b3, essentially the queen can't capture it anymore. So it's a good move as well. It's there's a bunch of different candidate moves, so those are one of them. There's also an even better move in this position as well. So pawn b3 is a good idea, but is there a better move in this position as well? Queen c2? So queen c2, yeah, also a good move as well, because remember that we talked about trying to go for this pawn as well. So bringing the queen here as well opens up this huge diagonal, right? So yeah, it's a good move. Well done. I was looking for queen b3 as well. So this is, I'd say, the best move. So queen c2 also works as well. There's like some complex lines later on that like refutes queen c2, but I'd say in your games, like you guys like are beginners, I'm assuming anyway, that's why you're here, but they won't find like the critical lines. So queen c2 will probably still work in your games as well, but queen b3 I'd say is the most forcing move, because essentially what queen b3 is that it offers a queen trade between our opponents, right? It also defends this b2 pawn, and yeah, pretty much that's all it is, pretty much. Queen c2 also works, queen b3 works, pawn b3 also works. Like, they're all good candidate moves, and I'm glad that you're all finding them as well, so that's a good sign that you're all improving pretty much. I have a final tip and trick, or tips and tricks even. So remember that we talked about our light squared bishop, right? Our light squared bishop is the heart of the position, and that it always belongs on e3. But it takes time to get that bishop there, right? It takes 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to get there, right? That in chess, 4 moves is a pretty long time, right? So what if black stops that, right? What if black stops our our bishop from getting to this critical square by playing bishop f5, right? So if we play it now, it just gets traded off, right? And we no longer have the heart of our position, right? How do we stop this? What do you guys think? This is also a bit difficult as well. The answer to this, I'm like 99% sure you guys won't get it, because it doesn't. Actually, I'll show you what the answer is actually, because I'm a little bit conscious of the time. And essentially, it's completely forgetting the idea of the London system. So remember that we play c3 in London to create our pyramids. But if the bishop does come out here early, there's essentially no good way to get this bishop over here anymore. It takes a lot of time to get rid of that bishop, which is not ideal, right? So essentially we scrap the entire idea of bishop over here, and essentially what's called transposing, essentially like converting your position into another kind of opening. And that's what the Queen's Gambit is another kind of opening with all like a bunch of different moves and different theory. And I don't expect you guys to know what this is as well. Like, me personally, I don't even know that much about the Queen's Gambit. I'm sure you do as well. You got very excited about it. Yeah. But essentially, if the bishop gets out here earlier than you can get the bishop out, then try something else, pretty much. Try learning the Queen's Gambit. Like, if you guys come to the next session and tell me you guys learned the Queen's Gambit, I'm going to be so happy. Like, that'd be great. But, like, it's okay, right? It's difficult as well. So, pretty much, if you can't get your bishop here, scrap the idea of the London and go for something else. I guess you can play, like, very solid as well. You know, you can play bishop f2, you can get your knight out, you can castle, and you just play chess, pretty much. Like, you don't have to play these openings like that. You can just play solid chess, right? Stick to the principles that we talked about last week. So getting your pawns out, getting your pieces out, controlling the center and castle, and go for an attack, pretty much. But if you guys want to learn openings as well, like the Queen's Gambit, you're more than welcome to. So I'm going to do something called good move versus bad move. We did this last time, and you guys liked that, so I figured we should try it again. Bishop f4. Good move or bad move? What do you guys think? good move. Okay, how come? Yeah, exactly. So that is correct. It is a good move because it does control the center, and it's essentially the main way to get to the London system. So yeah, it's a good move. Well done. What about bishop e2? Good move or bad move? Any ideas? So remember, this is our light squared bishop. So where does it go? It's a bad move. Why? Okay. It is. That is correct. So your explanation was spot on, pretty much. Like, it's an okay move. It's not necessarily bad, but the idea of London is to bring it here, right, to bishop d3. And remember, the point of it is to open up this diagonal to get the king, pretty much, to attack this king. Whereas if it's on here, it doesn't really do much, right? It's not contributing to a future attack. So it's a bad move, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? How about knight c3? Is this a good move or a bad move? Sorry? Bad move? Yeah, exactly. So remember that we're trying to create this pyramid of pawns, right? And so bring the knight to c3. It looks okay. Remember that, like, it seems innocent at first because, you're saying, oh, I'm controlling the center, because a lot of openings, they bring out the knight to c3, and it's a good move because it controls the center. But in the London, it's not so good because you're trying to create this pyramid, and the knight blocks the c3 pawn. c5, c3, exactly. Yeah, nice. You're catching on. So, yeah, it's a bad move. Well done. How about queen b3? Is that a good move or a bad move? Any ideas? Good? Good move. Yeah, it's a good move. It's exactly the same position I showed you guys before. So remember that the whole point of the queen going here was to attack this b2 pawn. So we play queen b3, we stop the attack, we offer a trade of queens. It's a good move, right? Remember that the alternative was, so queen c2 and pawn b3 are all completely fine moves. Queen b3, and also a good move as well. So good move, yeah. Well done, guys. Knight e5. Good move or a bad move? What do you guys think? Any ideas? No? Good move? Okay. How come? Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of a similar position to what I showed you last time as well. So remember that the long-term plans of the London was to get this queen active towards this side of the board. So bringing the knight into the center of the board allows the queen to get in here, pretty much, right? So it's a good move. And remember that we don't take this knight because that's essentially surrendering our control of the center. We want black to take us so we can recapture with the pawn and then go for this big attack, right? So it's a good move. Yeah, well done. And I think this is the last one. Bishop takes bishop. Good move or bad move? Bad? Okay, how come? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so it's a bad move because if we take, the queen takes, and remember that this bishop needs to control this e5 square, right? So if we trade it off, we stop controlling the e5 square, and it's bad, right? We want to rock it back. We want to rock it back to g3 so that we still maintain control of the center, right? I think that was the last one. Yeah, so your turn. I am conscious that it is 7:57 right now, so if you guys like do want to stay for a bit longer as well, then you're more than welcome to, but of course this lesson does like officially end at 8, so if you do want to leave, you're more than welcome to as well. But if you guys want to get together as well, like try and pair up or get into groups as well, and basically like try and play the London system against each other, pretty much. Try and get this pyramid structure going on, and like if you have any questions as well, just let me know, right? Of course, as I said before, like it is 8 o'clock, so if you do want to leave, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to stay, I'd be glad to help you out. But yeah, for those that do want to leave, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that you stayed this long. I really appreciate that you've like all paid attention, and I hope that you've all learned something as well. So next lesson we'll talk about the middle games. I won't be doing it, so Josh will be doing that. I need to speak to you afterwards as well. But yeah. So it was this one. This one? No? This one? Okay. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate that. And if you guys want to stay as well, like try and play the London system against each other, you're more than welcome to. But yeah, thank you guys. If you guys want to go to the same table as well, in the center, you're more than welcome to as well. You can't play chess by yourself, you know. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention as well is that like every time you're playing your moves as well, like try and explain why you made each move as well. So it's a nice little bit of teaching stuff as well.
I would play d4, but
I recommend.
that's just I want to do something that gets exciting.
What you thought?
Not e4.
The board's turned out.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
it is. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I would play e4, but d4 in this position, just to get something exciting going. Start spicing it up a bit.
Yeah, but we've got to teach the basics. We've got to teach the good principles
Yeah, but
first.
what
Then we can go.
would you do with Charlie James? There's good principles. There's nothing to do other than make it interesting.
Okay, we're rocking. Rook E, whatever that is. E or so.
It should be E8, but it just, yeah, I would just push the pawn, get
Develop pieces. There's not much to
the
do.
bishop can't go anywhere. The horses don't really want to go anywhere. The bishop doesn't really need to go anywhere.
Because you can just take that.
The rook still moves, but the one rook gets slammed. Push the ball.
There's like 30 seconds. I can literally just click that. Yes. So it's not like.
So that
So
white
it-
bishop is hanging.
it
So
also-
also your white bishop is hanging, so actually this will take your bishop, right?
Yeah, I know, yeah. So the thing falls apart within like 30 seconds if they are willing to trade with you. I know because what I want to bring up.
It looks like white's played more moves than black. It looks like you played 4 moves and you played 2. Could be wrong on that.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
But you're right, this sort of position would be great for because you just take a bishop.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if black's going to develop, you want to avoid development to strike to control on the white. So black probably doesn't bring up the bishop. This is why you can only move further than the right, because you get separate.
It's boring. Just like stay still. Just like once you change it, just make it even other possible. Get all of it. What is the aim for them? Make people fucking so bored there.
Yeah, you basically associate wondering you've got the pieces on the most safe side possible and then sit.
I thought so.
Because it feels like once you do anything, like going
I watched a GM game, like me and Nick were watching a blitz game between two people who were at like 3,000 on chess.com, and it was in London, and at the end of the game it was just a draw, and we checked the entries like 99% accuracy, and the evaluation was just 0 the whole game. It was just like, nothing happened the whole game. It was so...
Boring.
White can get attacks, and white can make it interesting as well. The most critical lines of them can be interesting, but the problem is, if either side wants to be boring, the game is going to be boring. You can't force something to happen, you know?
Yeah, but if you're teaching beginners, you've got to teach them good principles. I know that it's
I
like,
would probably teach principles. I'm not sure if I would teach like a specific thing. I think I would be like, pawn in the sense of putting pieces that are...
yeah, that's what we did last time.
Oh,
That's
right.
yeah.
Yeah, London assumption, like, it's fine.
We've got to be like.
It gives you a position to play chess from the beginning. It makes sense.
Is it? Was it? Yes. That's why I quit chess.
I think he's overrated actually.
It
Well,
actually,
I'm a certified London hater, so
I know.
I can't believe you.
Josh, it just made a square again. I literally told it the pixel by pixel ratio I wanted and it made it up a square. It's the exact same thing.
Just tell it it's normal. Good drainage or less.
What's the thing called? The resolution.
Resolution.